Hello and good day. I'm David Boles, and this is Boles.tv. Hey, it's Boles.television, coming to you live and in person from the East Coast of these United States. Well, I hope you're doing well. It's getting a little colder here on the East Coast, but they say it might warm up a little bit and then get cold again, which I guess is what you expect when you're heading into winter. What's going on in the world, and not all of them are great. And when you try to create a live show like this, you really don't know what you're doing or what you're going to talk about or what's going to happen. And then during the week between shows, you say, oh, this could be interesting to have conversation about. We could discuss this. And then you start saving things. And then, they all kind of start relating to each other on interesting levels that you weren't really anticipating or even planning. And that's sort of a happy kind of conclusion, an interesting happenstance that just puts it all together for you. And I realized that the topics that I wanted to try to talk about today are basically choices between good and evil. Doing the right thing and doing the wrong thing. It's really just that simple. Now, we like to think, we live in a world of gray, where, it could be this, maybe it's the other side, meow, I don't know. Sometimes there's no in between. Sometimes you have to make a decision. I'm going this way, and I'm not going that way. Right and wrong, good and bad. And it can be a difficult thing to try to navigate. And one of those examples that we are currently, unfortunately, living in is this ridiculously strange and awful, and I mean ridiculous in the most horrific, terroristic sense of the word, war that's going on in the Middle East, where Israel was terrorized by Hamas, and now Israel is paying back Hamas, and other people are in the way, and some of the world is outraged. But is it real outrage? Or is it faux outrage? And it seems awfully well choreographed to me that the second that Israel fights back and stands up for itself, there are certain people who get out and protest against Israel. And I have a lot of Jewish friends. I do not have a lot of Palestinian friends. As far as I know, I have no Hamas friends. So am I biased? I don't know. I don't think so. I'm sort of non-religious myself. And then on television, you see these, children in Gaza who are in trouble, and well, what do you do when, the bad people use regular citizens to protect themselves, and they build bunkers under hospitals and under schools? And that's all fine. People are concerned about the children of Palestine. I understand it. I get that. But the protests of pulling down posters of Israeli hostages, I find curious. Well executed, well planned. And then on television, you see these worldwide protests in the streets. Not pro-Israel, not supporting Israel after they get terrorized. But you see these protests are against Israel for fighting back for their own sovereignty. Very well orchestrated. It hits me as being very curious. One of the news shows had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different international pro-Palestine protests, people walking outraged in the street. And they put it on the news, which is interesting in itself. But you sit there and you can only wonder, where was the similar coverage and in the street protests for the good people of Ukraine when they were invaded by a madman intentionally declaring war against a sovereign nation? Where is the support for Ukraine? It's sort of been there. But even in America, you have people, politicians, who are pro-Putin, pro-invader, pro-terrorist. I don't remember seeing international protests in the streets to support the good people of Ukraine who have been invaded by a madman. I didn't see it. And because of the war, I have some very good friends in Ukraine who suffer, and we have spoken to them and covered him a lot. And I even have some friends in Russia who do not support the war and who do not support Putin, but who are stuck because they can't get out now because Putin's blocked all passports and ways of exiting the country. So just that, not who bombs who and who retaliates against what, that good and evil depends on your point of view, I guess. But what I find good and evil is in the way that the media is covering or not covering these international incidences of war. And it's nothing new. They choose one side over the other. We're going to give all of our airtime to these pro-Palestine protests, international, but Ukraine gets nothing. I find it very odd. I find it quite disturbing and really disappointing. But we're also seeing that, talking about the difference between good and evil in this coverage of Donald Trump, who is, unabashedly pro-authoritarianism, pro-fascist. And he gets covered in the New York Times and other major media outlets and on television as if he's a legitimate, normal human being who has not been convicted in a court of raping and who is not accused of, 91 crimes against states and the federal government. And he's given the same sort of coverage as Joe Biden. But Joe Biden, they say, oh, he's old, he's feeble. Oh, look at Trump, he's strong, he's powerful. It's just good and bad. You have a good man on one side, and many would say a bad man on the other. And bad men have fans, and bad men have people who support them. And the History Channel right now has been running all morning documentaries, I think 8 in a row, 8 hours of documentaries about the rise of Hitler. And there are a lot of parallels, a lot of propaganda, a lot of very interesting similarities that are going on in America right now and what was happening in Germany in 1933. And sure, people will dismiss that. Some people will dismiss that. Oh, that's fancy thinking. That's educated thinking. I know what I like. And I like the Dixie flag and the Nazi flag. And there's one guy who's my guy, and I'm going to follow him to the end of the earth and give him all my money. It's distressing. And as I've said many times online, we're in for a fight. One side tends to be forgiving and want to get along, and the other side wants to kill the other side. And I said, depending on what side you're on, if you are on the side of, neutrality and goodness and happiness and everyone is equal, you're going to have to fight them because they are going to fight you. You criticize them about anything, not just me, but you make a point against them, and their answer isn't based in fact or something interesting. It's usually based on violence. And they often end a conversation like, well, I'll shoot you. Something like that. Terrible, right? The difference between good and bad. We know the difference. They know the difference. The bad people know that they're not on the side of righteousness and goodness because they don't care. They like who they are. They like where they are. So one of our friends that we know without ever having met him is Bob Lefsetz. And Bob said a very interesting letter out this morning that I'll share with you now. Lefsetz's letter, I'll put the link in our Boles Blogs Discord server. And he talks about Sam Harris. Now, who is Sam Harris? I'll tell you in a moment. But he talks about the Sam Harris podcast, the bright line between good and evil. So you see right there, I've been thinking about these topics we're going to talk about today, and I realized that the through line, the thread, the dramatic arc, if you will, has been good and evil. And so when this pops up from Bob this morning in my email, and I see he's talking about Sam Harris, and I'm thinking, hey, now wait a minute, good and evil. Okay, we're seeing something here. And whatever Bob says, I do, because Bob is very smart. He reminds me of my friend Howard Stein at Columbia University. So when Bob says read something, listen to something, do something, I do it. Just like when Howard would tell me to do something, I would do it, because they were always right. So Bob starts off his letter saying, you have to listen to this podcast by Sam Harris, The Bright Line Between Good and Evil. Let me repeat that, Bob says. You have to listen to this. This is my #1 audio recommendation of the year. Of all the music, all the podcasts I've ever told you about, this is where you should dedicate your time. This is where you should trust me. This speaks to the essence of what is going on in the Middle East. Now, Bob is a self-proclaimed, powerful super Jew. Now, we've talked about super Jew before, between the regular Jew and the super Jew. And a friend of mine who is Jewish said that he is a super Jew, defining himself, not Bob Lefsetz. And a super Jew is a person who goes around going the extra mile in doing the right thing. So super Jew is not a condemnation. It's actually something that they're proud of. And I would call Bob a super Jew, which is a high compliment. So he talks about jihad. He talks about Sam Harris. God is great, but so is death. In the podcast, being a martyr is a route to paradise. Okay, so they're talking about good and evil. And then Bob ends his letter saying, I need to tell you about it. I need to tell everybody. Sam Harris is wiser than all those ceasefire bozos in the New York Times. Not that Harris believes the Israelis should be attacking Gaza in this way at all. It's just that Harris can see the forest for the trees. He's not caught up in the moment. He's got perspective. It's the opposite of a horse race. Like the endless coverage of the presidential election a year out. Harris is not interested in gotcha headlines. You're either into what he has to say or not. And everybody's going to be into Harris, but his audience will grow if people keep telling others like I am now. So Bob is going to bat for Sam Harris. Now, who is this Sam Harris? Well, Bob says, I don't know anything about Sam Harris. Who knows? I could do some investigation and find out. I don't. And find out I don't agree with him on most points. But this one episode, wow. Okay, fair enough. So, I'll tell you who Sam Harris is. Sam Harris teaches biological morality. I wrote this review about Sam Harris in his book in 2010. I know Sam Harris. Not personally, but I know him. Sam Harris is one of those special thinkers like Richard Dawkins who dare to stand up to popular thought and challenge our ideas of religion against our ideas of relative moralism. Sam's new book is The Moral Landscape, and he teaches us why morality is biological. Okay? So, Sam Harris, how science can determine. All right. Now, who is Sam Harris? You'd probably say he's an atheist, writes a lot of books, talks about interesting things, right? Fair enough. Okay. It's also important to know that Sam Harris has a mother named Susan Harris. Susan Harris is the super genius mind and creator behind the television show The Golden Girls. I believe she wrote all of the episodes. She at least planned them all. So Susan Harris, super rich, did very well. Super smart, incredibly creative, an important person that not a lot of people know. And her son is Sam Harris. Sam is not really, as far as I know, in entertainment or comedy, but he has his mother's gifts for intellectualism and thought. So this is Sam Harris. He's written several books. He's very interesting. You need to check him out. I completely agree with Bob Lefsetz about the genius mind of Sam Harris. Here's what Richard Dawkins says about the moral landscape. Richard Dawkins is another atheist, does not believe in God. And Sam Harris is sort of, I would say, using religious terms, an acolyte of Richard Dawkins. Dawkins says, I was one of those who had unthinkingly bought into the hectoring myth that science can say nothing about morality, morals. Interesting, right? To my surprise, the moral landscape has changed all of that for me. It should change it for philosophers too. Philosophers of mind have already discovered that they can't duck the study of neuroscience, and the best of them have raised their game as a result. Sam Harris shows that the same should be true of moral philosophers, and it will turn their world exhilaratingly upside down. As for religion and the preposterous idea that we need God to be good, nobody wields a sharper bayonet than Sam Harris. And here's what Sam says about his own book. Religious ideas about good and evil tend to focus on how to achieve well-being in the next life, and this makes them terrible guides to securing it in this one. Of course, there are few gems to be found in every religious tradition, but insofar as these precepts are wise and useful, they are not, in principle, religious. You do not need to believe that the Bible was dictated by the Creator of the universe, or that Jesus Christ was his Son, to see the wisdom and utility of following the Golden Rule. Sam Harris continues, the problem with religious morality is that it often causes people to care about the wrong things, leading them to make choices that needlessly perpetuate human suffering. Consider the Catholic Church. This is an institution that excommunicates women who want to become priests, but it does not excommunicate male priests who rape children. The Church is more concerned about stopping contraception than stopping genocide. It is more worried about gay marriage than about nuclear proliferation. Sam continues, when we realize that morality relates to questions of human and animal well-being, we can see that the Catholic Church is as confused about morality as it is about cosmology. It is not offering an alternative moral framework, it is offering a false one. Even the faithful can't really get their deepest moral principles from religion because books like the Bible and the Quran are full of barbaric injunctions that all decent and sane people must now reinterpret or ignore. How is it that most Jews, Christians, and Muslims are opposed to slavery? You don't get this moral insight from Scripture because the God of Abraham expects us to keep slaves. Sam finishes. Consequently, even religious fundamentalists draw many of their moral positions from a wider conversation about human values that is not in principle religious. We are the guarantors of the wisdom we find in Scripture, such as it is. And we are the ones who must ignore God when he tells us to kill people for working on the Sabbath. And here's what I think. I'll put the link to this blog article on our Discord server. So that's Bob Lefsetz talking about Sam Harris. Sam Harris, the mother of Susan Harris. Sam Harris is his own man, very smart, writes his own books. And here is the podcast that Bob Lefsetz was talking about, Making Sense with Sam Harris. And here is the article, the podcast that Bob was talking about. I can't play any of this because I don't own the rights to this, so I would get in trouble, but I will post this on our Discord server so you can listen to the Sam Harris podcast. I'm giving you all warm up. I'm giving the background. I've set the table for him to knock you home in all the right good ways. And here is the PR blurb. Sam Harris speaks about the ongoing war in Gaza, the global rise of anti-Semitism, and the enduring problem of jihadism. If the Making Sense podcast logo on your player is black, you can subscribe to gain access to a full-length episode at samharris.org. Subscribe. So what is the episode website? We'll click on that. Sam Harris. I will also put this on our Discord server. So Sam is a very smart guy. He knows what he's doing. And he has warnings for us. And all of those are fair and important. And the warnings coming for us are not coming just from Sam Harris, but from what is being revealed going on in the news around us. And right now we're going to take a very brief break, and then we're going to return and continue this conversation, this circular conversation, about the differences between good and evil and what personal choices we decide to make in favor of which side. Returning in a moment. Hey, we are back. This is Boles.tv. It's Boles.television, coming to you live from the East Coast of the United States. So we've been talking about good and evil. In the sharpest sense of the word, politics, terrorism, war, which side are you on? Now, that is a really important question that a lot of people don't want to answer. A lot of people who are, not hard right or hard left just kind of want to be left alone. I only want to eat my potato chips and watch the football game. Everything else, get away from me. And that's fair up to a point. But there is a point in every life where you're going to have to make a decision. Which side are you on? And sometimes that question is asked with a hand, as in a handshake, an open hand. And sometimes that question is asked, which side are you on, with a gun pointed at you. Now, you want to try to make these decisions before it gets to that point. And it's no longer acceptable to be neutral about terrible things that are going on in the world. Which side are you on? Are you on the side of good or are you on the side of evil? And I don't believe that people who are all the way on the side of evil think that they're doing good. They know they're not. They delight in the cruelty and the evilness of what they're doing. Now, some people say, well, the bad people always get what's coming to them. Not necessarily true. We know a lot of terrible people. You know a lot of terrible people who are successful or who have money or who have power or who are well-liked and admired, and they're just the most rotten, awful people you've ever met in your life. And you sit back and you think, I've done all the right things in my life. I've been kind to people. I go to church on the weekends. I give money to the poor. And I try not to care about, things that are unfair in life, but sometimes I just get fed up and I think, what am I doing wrong? Why are they successful and everything that I'm doing right, I can't find success? Those are very fair questions. And some politicians are able to tap into the dark side of that. Well, you're not successful because of those people over there. Now you get rid of those people. I'll get rid of them for you. Vote for me. We get rid of them. And you will take their place. They won't replace you. You'll replace them. And then you're going to be really successful and people are going to like you and you're going to have a lot of money and people are going to want to be your friend. But you can't get there without me. Now that's very dangerous thinking and people tend to want to buy into the easy way out. You can't underestimate how lazy people are. But we're past the point of being lazy. Now we're back to the point of where you have to stand up and move to one side or the other. And it's not going to be enough to say, well, the elections will decide the right thing. There are more of us than them, even though we don't all vote. Things are being changed behind the scenes. Government things are being put in place that will block honest, open, interesting conversation and even elections at some point. Yeah. The stolen election hasn't happened yet, but it's coming. Now, in our continuing conversation about good and evil, sometimes it's very clear there are terrible, evil things in the world. And sometimes it's not so clear. Like the example of abortion and rape. There are people who say, look, children should not be raped and children should not be forced to carry their rapist child to term. Most people I know would not be in favor of raped children having to keep the child. But there are some people who think, oh no, it has to be that way. So where is that line between good and bad, the right, the wrong, the moral and the immoral? Is it moral or immoral that children are suffering in Gaza? Does it depend on your point of view, or is the suffering the only thing that matters? Who is defending the child who was raped? The people protecting the unborn child or the people protecting the child who was raped? As a good son of Nebraska, reading stories like this sicken me. From the Flatwater Press. Now, there are a couple of independent, I would say, newspapers that are online only. A Nebraska Examiner, I believe, is the other one. And they've completely usurped all the power that the Omaha World Herald used to have, and the Lincoln Star used to have, and the Lincoln Journal-Star used to have, and the Lincoln Journal used to have. Because those newspapers are dying, they're dead, they rely on advertising, they have really no staff anymore. So the staff from those old good newspapers that would report the truth in the battle between the goodness and the badness in the world are now writing for Flatwater Press and Nebraska Examiner. And here's the headline. Investigation at Boys Town. Questions emerge over alleged sexual abuse. Fundraising for a youth home. Now, Boys Town has been romanticized in the movies, right? Father Flanagan, Boys Town, where young boys go in this Catholic setup to be reformed, to get a new life, to be made whole and as one. And there are things that Boys Town has done over the years that are good. And sometimes really terrible things happen in good places. Shayla Nielsen remembers being required to take tests about Boys Town's rich history and its founder, Father Edward J. Flanagan, before she and other teens were allowed to work at its Welcome Center in Omaha's west side. Omaha, Nebraska. That's where Boys Town is located. The former Michigan truant, now 25, remembers being handpicked to attend Boys Town's annual Blue Water Bash fundraiser at Lake Okoboji in Iowa. And Iowa, Nebraska, Omaha, Council Bluffs. Omaha is here, Council Bluffs is here. There's a bridge separating the two cities, the two states. So it's like a Twin City thing, but it isn't the Twin City. It's Omaha and Council Bluffs, where tickets sell for thousands of dollars to benefit the nonprofit summer camp. Like other wards, ward of the state, right, Boys Town, she said she was recruited to tell donors about her Dickensian backstory and her second chance. I sold them on the Boys Town image, how it saves your life, how it was always there for you. And I will post the link to this fascinating article on our Discord server. Nielsen had no way of knowing then that Boys Town already amassed more from fundraising than the vast majority of America's 1.37 million public charities. She also never imagined that she would one day sue Boys Town over sexual abuse she alleges she suffered there. Boys Town, with family-style foster homes at its home campus in Nebraska, and with satellite residential programs in New Orleans, Portsmouth, Rhode Island, Orlando, and Tallahassee, Florida, is one of the oldest, largest, wealthiest, and most renowned youth-focused charities in the world. So this abuse, the abuse Nielsen alleges she suffered when she lived at Boys Town, was not isolated. At least 12 rapes, 6 aggravated assaults, and 111 other assaults were reported by Boys Town's village police department over the last 5 years. The difference between good and bad. Bad things happen to good people, and evil things happen inside of good covenants. Boys Town advertises that it adheres to the highest standards of safety, but it doesn't deny abuse sometimes happens. Quote, bad things can happen and do happen in child care settings, quote, the charity said in a statement. Quote, and while some of these situations are often unavoidable, they are still unacceptable. Now, what does that mean? Child rape and sexual abuse is unavoidable? But the public has no way of knowing how much abuse is substantiated in its programs, which house kids from Iowa and other states. So that's kind of what goes on at Boys Town, in that Boys Town is a place where bad kids are sent. So is it other kids who are sexually abusing other kids? Is it staff abusing other kids? You know, it really doesn't matter, because there's a problem with the system when the system says, well, that sort of rape is just unavoidable. It's the choice, again, between good and bad. It's the choice between which side do you stand? The side of right or the side of wrong? Continuing our theme, from the New York Times. Does anyone know how to behave on the subway anymore? Asking a question they already know the answer to. The answer is nobody behaves on the subway anymore. Did they ever? And it's a policing problem. You need to have police in the subway. And sometimes you see the police in the subway, and they used to patrol in pairs for safety, their own safety. And then there was a moment where one of the mayors wanted to split up the pairs of patrolling officers so he'd have more officers. Well, that just made the officers more scared and didn't want to go into the subway. But when you see police in the subway, they're usually not in the subway on the platform. They're outside the station standing there on their phones. And I'm not saying that to be rude or mean. You can ask any New Yorker. Are there police officers inside the train cars while the train is moving, patrolling, looking at people, keeping the peace? Or is it more likely that they're not in the subway car, they're outside the station, up where the air is, and they're looking at their phone? They're looking at their phone. So how do you make people care about their job? I don't know. There are unwritten rules when riding the subway in New York. No eye contact, no blocking doors, no hogging seats. Yeah, right. 3 years after the coronavirus nearly wiped out the ridership in the nation's largest transportation network, millions of travelers are reacquainting themselves with transit's informal customs. The pandemic has suspended those protocols as many passengers stayed home. But now, in a sign that normalcy may be returning, old subway tensions are creeping back as more riders pack the system. And this article, and I will post a link on our Discord server, is really delicious, and you'll enjoy reading it in full. Here is an example of what you're never supposed to do on the subway. Taking up 2 seats. And this person is taking up 1 seat and then is blocking the second seat with their foot. Now, I know people in New York who will come and say, I would like the seat, and if the person ignores you or doesn't move their foot, they would just sit on their leg, and then they'll move. Man-spreading is a big problem. You don't man-spread in public transportation, but that doesn't mean people don't do it anyway, because they do it. Be careful where you sit. Now, I've had that problem before where I'm in one seat and I notice the seat next to me has water on it. Like, I don't know if it's water or if it's urine or if it's rain from the window. I don't know. So, the whole car is full and people standing and there's one empty seat. So you try to do the nice thing. You try to be nice and say, look, be careful. This is what happened. Be careful of that seat because there's something wet on it. And this woman looked at me and sat down. I don't think she believed me. I think she thought I wanted the extra room. I didn't have a bag. My foot was not on the seat. I was just saying, be careful, there's something on the seat. I didn't sit there. I sat over here. I got off the train before she did, but I guarantee you, when she got up out of that seat, she had a big stain, you know where. So this is a problem. Trash. Some riders take up more than their fair share of seats, even when others are standing. This poor dog wants to sit. What's wrong with this picture? The person in blue has their bag on the second seat. Now, you can go up and say, can you move your bag? But a lot of people don't want the hassle. Because now on the train, you don't know who has a gun, who has a knife, who's going to choke you out. So most people just say, I'll put up with it till I get there. Here's an up-close picture of the trash that people leave behind. That's just nasty. I mean, a lot of people leave it on the floor of the subway car. Oh, man-spreading, we were talking about that. That's what this is. That guy is. See, this is, I believe, a woman crossing her legs politely, so there's room for everyone. And this guy's taking up 2 seats because, I don't know, he's a guy. It's ridiculous. And I have been guilty of man-spreading myself, and you just have to learn to behave and not man-spread and be uncomfortable. People bring bicycles on the crowded subway cars, so you can't stand, you can't get by, you can't move. It's a big mess. And there are limited hours where you can bring your bicycle on a subway because some people need to ride the subway, but it's not allowed during rush hour, but people do it anyway. So I will put the link to that fantastic article on our Discord server. What else is going on between good and evil? Bad behavior on the subway is evil. Here's another bad story. Texas. Surprise, surprise. Texas School for the Deaf will lay off interpreters before the end of the year. Well, isn't that lovely? So how are these deaf children supposed to communicate with the world or to understand what's going on without the aid of an interpreter? I guess Texas doesn't care. Which side are you on? The side of the state of Texas, or are you on the side of the disabled deaf child who needs an interpreter to understand what's being taught in class? It's not that hard making the right decision. But I guarantee you there are some people in the world who will say, oh, those deaf children, well, they don't belong in this world. They can just stay over there alone, isolated, so we Texans can save some money. Here's the article. I will post this as well as our Discord server because I can't play this because I don't have the rights. The Texas School for the Deaf is laying off its interpreters. The school announced it's eliminating its in-house interpreting service as part of a reduction in force. Well, isn't that great? Your job is to serve deaf children, and as part of serving them, you're cutting out their interpreters. I laugh because I'm crying. In a letter obtained by KVUE, the school told interpreters that their employment will end on December 31st, 2023, and that their job function is being eliminated. The letter also stated that there's no guarantee of employment and that interpreters will continue to need to provide high-quality service and meet all job expectations to remain employed through the end of the year. TSD said that beginning January 1st, it will outsource interpreters to a specialized language service provider in an attempt to better manage its interpreting expenses and streamline its budget, which means I am quite sure that it's going to be via television. It's going to be tele-video, you know, where you meet your doctor online. That's how they're going to do interpreting. The child's going to need the interpreter. They're going to make a call to the interpreter video service. The interpreter is going to show up on video and interpret for the child. Not personal, not one-on-one, not an actual interpreter in the room that you can see and touch and feel. No. It's going to be video interpreting. Which side are you on? Are you on the side of the deaf child or are you on the side of the state of Texas? Finally, we have this story. I laughed when I read it, and then I read the article. I laughed when I read the headline, and then I read the article, and I was disgusted. From the San Francisco Gate, it's true, people do poop a lot in ride lines at Disneyland and Disney World. What? It can't be. Oh, it's true. It sounds too disgusting, too outlandish to be real. A Disneyland urban legend of the gross-out variety that people are dropping trow and pooping where they stand in line for rides. But unfortunately for the weak-stomached, the rumor is absolutely real. Twice in the last month, posters on the Disney World subreddit commented in fury and horror about the cursed things they'd seen while waiting in line. I'm in queue for the rise of the resistance. Someone let their kid take a dump on the floor, and they just walked out and left it. What the F? Said one person. That fecal sighting was supported almost in real time by a commenter who said they worked at the attraction. For the skeptics, they said, this actually happened. Fun fact, this was one of 3 poop-related incidences at Rise today. Less fun fact was I was here for all 3 of them. Now, I'm sorry, but this is just bad parenting. Parents taking children who are too young to go to Disneyland and Disney World, who don't enjoy it, don't know how to behave, they're upset, and the parents go because they're selfish. They don't know how to train their kids to behave. They don't know how to potty train their kids. They don't come prepared for every single emergency, and they let their problems cascade into the public pool, into the pooping in the lines at the ride. It's absolutely stunning. And yet they think it's just fine. They think it's okay. If I have to suffer with my children, they must think, so too shall you suffer with me. It's a choice between good and bad, between evil and honesty, between right and wrong. It's not that hard. And yet you'll get some people who will come to the defense of these terrible parents. Oh, it's not the parents' fault that the kid can't hold its poop. Two former Disneyland custodial team workers have also written about this unsavory topic in their book, Cleaning the Kingdom, Insider Tales of Keeping Walt's Dream Spotless. In the chapter titled Disgusting Things, former cast members, as employees are referred to in the company parlance, reveal there's a name for such happenings. It's called Human Code H. A Code H, according to the authors, originally referred to horse poopy. A Code H meant a custodial worker needed to clean up after one of the horses pulling a main street vehicle doing its business. The term was later modified to reflect a bowel movement of the human variety. And in case you're thinking this is a pandemic-induced phenomenon, the authors of the book worked in the park primarily in the 1990s. So the pooping has been going on for a long time. The bad parenting is everywhere. I'd say hide your children, but the children are pooping in the street. Their gnarliest story, turn back here if you're feeling queasy, although you did willingly click on an article about Disney poopers, you're probably here for the horror stories, occurred at an Indiana Jones adventure in Disneyland. There's a pair of individual use restrooms just backstage from the north, they wrote. It was mainly for cast members, but guests could and did use it anyway. A woman who did not know this burst into the control room for the attraction and pooped right there. It must have been challenging for the ride operator to stay at their post in there before it was all cleaned up. What's going on in the world? Why is all these terrible things happening? Wars, protests, Boys Town, people on subways, blocking seats. The Texas deaf school decides the children don't need interpreters in the classroom. Pooping at Disney. The whole world is crumbling around us, and what are we going to do about it? It's a challenging question. I don't know if there's an answer. But I do urge you to pick a side. And I hope you pick the side of the extended hand for shaking, instead of the side that's saying, look, are you with us or against us? And they're pointing a gun at you. They're threatening you. Which side are you on? Try to get on the side that doesn't have to threaten people to get them to go along with the idea that they are promoting. So I have all these links today. I'll put them on our Discord server. I thank you so much for being here. Take care. Have a wonderful day. If you have any ideas, thoughts you want to share, you know where to find me. Until next time, I'll see you. Bye.